That is a sad sand grain.
A sand grain. It was a sand grain. It had a little round thing on it. It had a scratch that was parabolic.
Who was showing a picture of just one sand grain?
They weren't, but there was this one giant sand grain, and it looked sad because this is what it looked like. If I drew that image, that would have been what I drew.
Yeah. If you drew it, it would be what you drew. Yeah, it sure would be.
Like if I had to
That's how it works usually.
Yes, but like if I had to do a lab where I drew sand grains, and it was like draw everything in this field, I would have been forced to draw this. This isn't simulation, that's the sad sand grain.
It's the real sad sand grain.
And then...
Did you write sand grain or sad grain?
Sad grain. And then later on, I was explaining to someone, I can't find it because I was flipping through pages, but it was like, there was a sand grain and it was the pareidolia thing, like it had a face on it. And it was a frowny face, and I tried to draw it again, but from memory, and then they said, that looks kind of like James. And I said, it does not look like James. And they said, well, what if you add some hair? And so that is the sad sand grain with some curly hair on it, and I don't think it looks like James.
No, not really.
But I definitely
when I think
made
of James, I don't think of a sand grain.
Yeah, so there's the sad sand grain that I drew from memory, and there's it as like an exact copy of what I saw. See?
What was the point of this talk that had such large pictures of sand grains? That you could see their faces.
It was all sorts of stuff that was about the precursor to the Triassic extinction.
Oh, you were in there for my question.
I was in there for your question.
It wasn't
so this is Kathleen's sad sand grain.
Well, honestly, I got up to cross to the West building and then heard your voice and was like, okay, I should listen to the question and the answer now.
Sorry.
No, it wasn't answered.
Okay, that's not just me. I'm glad about that. I'm fine for that to be not something that they care about.
Yeah.
But I just wasn't sure if I was being real dumb. So
no, and your question wasn't answered. But I did think it was really interesting that they were potentially tying it to the magmatism. Like camp-related magmatism rather than volcanism, because there were dikes and stuff, and I thought that was cool. Mm-hmm. Are we being recorded?
We are. We started.
Oh, so okay, because I said that like it was meant to be intelligible in case we were being recorded.
Okay. It is the final day. Dawn on the final day, and we start. The first talk I saw was Brendan's talk.
Yay! It was in the morning on the final day.
What?
So
I was not there.
That's
okay.
That was probably obvious.
Did you know that people learn a lot about ocean acidification, but think that the ocean's going to change colour because of it?
That's a good thing to know.
This was the best throwaway statement that Brendan had that he probably didn't.
It's in the paper.
Yes, but it's what everyone's obsessed with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the thing that everyone came out that going.
No, it's because like people understand
what
that.
What color do they think it's going to be? Green?
So they put an indicator in liquid and then they bubbled into it to add CO2 to show that as you add CO2 it changes.
Yeah.
And more than one person writing this up mentioned that the ocean water would change color.
Yes.
That was a thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
we also found a high percentage of people who thought that ocean acidification was related to acid rain.
No, we fixed that.
We didn't fix that. We have mostly gotten better with people thinking that ozone is responsible for global warming. Because, like, in the early 90s, that was much more common.
Okay.
In the early 2000s, it was much less common. It hasn't gotten any better since the early 2000s. There's still a subset of people that associate the two. And that's almost fair. Because
the hole in the ozone is making it hotter? Or that ozone itself is trapping gases?
Both.
Okay.
Trapping heat.
Yes, sorry.
Trapping gases is our number one thing that people wrote that was wrong that we found interesting to discuss.
There you go.
So trapping gas, people don't understand how physics works, which is fair because I guess I don't think that I understand how physics works.
I have a relevant life experience. Which is I was climbing Half Dome and explaining to people how friction worked, and that they needed to stand up straight to have the maximum friction on this slope and not stand parallel to the slope, which they were all doing. And many people told me that they never took physics, so they never drew a force body diagram. So, anyway.
The only time I've drawn a force body diagram since
college, high school.
Probably senior year of high school.
They didn't take it in high school.
The only time that I've done it since senior year of high school was in TA training at Cornell, because geology is in engineering at Cornell, and so that was one of the examples in our teaching training was a force body diagram. It was for like how you grade with a rubric. And so, like, we had a non-rubric form, and then let everybody do it, and then poll people for what grade they give, and then say, this is why you really need to have a rubric in anything with more than one TA.
But anyway, no, people don't take physics.
Yes,
so
people don't take physics. A lot of people say that, a lot of people's concept, this wasn't in my talk, so I guess I can just talk about it, random stuff. A lot of people think that gases are being trapped, or that like the cycling of carbon is being slowed, and that like stuff is being trapped in the atmosphere that happens to be warm.
Wouldn't that increase the pressure of the Earth?
Yes, but people don't think that far.
Okay.
People think that gases are being trapped. People also think that ozone has a factor, but it's there. In the early 90s, people thought that the ozone hole was letting in more light, and therefore it was heating the Earth more. And then now, I think that it's this lower level of conflation where, like, if people list things that are either pollutants that come out of cars or things that technically are greenhouse gases, like, the per mole effect of ozone is a bad thing, and ground level ozone is a bad thing. So like people still hear it in environmental classes, and people still hear it in the context of climate change and in the context of pollution, and so like it just can't be driven to zero. So that was the thing. But yes, because an indicator was used and the color changed in the fluid to show that it was becoming more acidic, we did have people who thought that the ocean would change color.
So, do you have any best practice that you want to share with us?
I'm honestly really happy that ocean acidification was mentioned at all, because we went from ocean acidification, the public understanding of ocean acidification has only been studied since 2010. We have no baseline for it before 2010. Since 2010, it's been studied in the American public only twice, and once in the British public, once in Alaska, and once polling people involved in shell fishing industry. And the shell fishing industry has a very high percentage of people who understand that it's a thing that exists. Alaska has a higher percentage of people who feel that it exists. But they also, interestingly, don't know that Alaska is more affected. They think that it's affecting the fishing industry evenly everywhere. But if you like poll random people in California, they don't know that it's a thing going on. It's only people who are involved in shell fisheries that know it's a thing. So that was the thing. It was interesting. So we have data on what people in the Northeast, which is not a major shell fishing area,
also
think about ocean acidification, and the answer is most of them have never heard of it.
Wow.
That was our result. It's like, and we have people are very fine accepting it, which is interesting, but not unexpected. And we wrote in the manuscript, we think that ocean acidification hasn't been politicized in the news.
Yeah, not at all.
And that's one factor. And another factor that was written about in the paper that was about Alaska was the words ocean acidification sound scary and concerning.
Yeah,
So-
like everyone knows acid is bad already.
Acid bad.
Being warm is actually kind of nice.
Yeah. Warm,
I
pleasant.
prefer being warm.
Warm, pleasant. Acidification bad.
Yeah, acidification, like, I wish you guys, Dantes Peak where the grandma walks into the lake.
He had that.
Yeah.
I
Like,
mentioned
that's,
that.
like,
I mentioned
like,
that.
that's still my number one, like, acid lake.
I showed an opinion piece from the New York Times, and I showed a graphic, and I was like, this is being written about. Like, the public is starting to hear about this.
Yeah.
But the basic physics has been understood for 150 years. and I mentioned Dantes Peak, and it's like, and here's the like Dantes Peak fish in the New York Times opinion article.
Yeah.
That film bothers me because if you watch that film, this is
Just this one thing about it bothers
There's
me.
a lot of things that bother me, but this is my all-time least favorite thing in disaster movies ever.
Mm-hmm.
Go on.
And it's not like a thing that's wrong with the science, because the science is wrong in lots of disaster movies for all sorts of reasons. The thing that bothers me is it's internally inconsistent and wrong.
Mm.
If you watch Dante's Peak, there's a bunch of dead fish, and they say, look, dead fish. The lake must be going acid or anoxic or whatever they say. And they're like, look, a bunch of dead fish. And then it eats through the boat, and then it eats through the grandmother.
Yes.
The grandmother's legs melt while there's dead fish floating in the background. Somehow, the fish scales are completely immune to acid, but
They're
you'll
well adapted.
dissolve a human.
They're like Ficella in the hot springs in Banff.
They're trapped.
Yeah. It's a snail.
That should dissolve faster.
Well,
Why are there? How come Grandma disappears in 4 minutes, but the fish are still floating there in the background?
They're well adapted. They make delicious.
Super anti. Yeah, maybe there's delicious fish.
So that was.
I wrote a 9th grade paper where I said like that was the thing that most bothered me in all.
In all of bad movies.
Yeah.
That's great.
9th grade Earth Science. That was like and then I wrote about how Armageddon is really bad. But Armageddon's really bad because they don't seem to have somebody who is in charge of continuity. Like, the science isn't that bad compared to the Deep Impact. But, like, people... There's no one in charge of whether something's on the left or the right in that whole movie. Like, in the beginning, they get shot in one of the legs, and then it changes which leg the bullet wound is in multiple times in the subsequent scene.
They were just editing and flipping the thing and not paying attention.
Yeah, they do that for the whole
Yeah.
movie. Like, everyone is holding a cup. There's people who are hugging, and they change which side they're hugging on. Like, nothing. Like, whoever was in charge of there was...
You were straight out of school.
Chirality failed in that movie. That's the real statement of Armageddon.
This is a fascinating...
I've had a few beers now.
Brendan's really on quite a roll here, y'all. Like, James and I can just go have another drink and we'll let Brendan film the podcast.
I'm tired, and I drank, and now you know.
The things that eat away at you at night.
Yes, like, it eats away at you like a grandmother's legs in a river.
Can I tweet that now?
You can tweet whatever you want because I'm not on Twitter, because my Twitter handle is one letter too long.
Maybe it's changed recently. Have you tried again?
No, I tried again like a couple weeks ago because James is reaching a round number, and so I would like to help him.
You don't. That's fine, Brendan.
I helped him. What else did you see today? Participate in?
This started as James saw my talk.
Yeah,
so James saw my talk. There were some people there. That was good. Before me was a talk that I went to see that was good, and before that was a talk that was about fire in Britain and how there's a lot of fire in Britain, which I definitely did not appreciate, and I missed the very beginning of the talk.
I missed the beginning as well. But the fire in Britain thing is we're the third highest country in the EU for fires, and we're solving that by trying to leave the EU. But a lot of that is like isolated fires that we put out quickly, but then occasionally like the moors will catch fire and then the peat will catch fire and it'll burn for 1,000 years. So
this is historical, not just...
Yes, but now...
It's modern and also...
But now...
Like, you started the fires and they're going to continue to burn.
We put we put a lot of energy into putting out the peat.
Yeah.
Because it's just coal isn't ready yet.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, I understand. Well, I mean, I'm from California.
No, I know you get it, but I mean, it's like... We
Yeah.
don't think about it in terms of the
not.
CO2 being put out.
Yes.
But also...
This is like whenever the tundra is on fire. It's kind of...
Yeah.
It's not permafrost. It's already defrosted and just burning.
Yeah.
And then after the fire talk was Ann Egger's talk, which is about
But was that in a paleo session, or was that just something you went
This
to?
was on the
because you were
communication
interested? Oh, it was in
session.
the communication
Yes,
session.
this is in the
Cool.
climate
It
communication
was an
session.
interesting end. So this person, I was talking to Alison about it, is like the leader in the field for fire science, which explains why the conveners did not try to stop him when he went over the deadline and stood up to hold his book for him when he talked about his book.
What's this person's name? Just curious.
I don't have it.
Long silence in the podcast.
I didn't go.
The worst part is he had 2 books that were shown around, and so I definitely saw his name in large lettering. But I study things in the ocean, and so I did not.
Things don't tend to catch fire.
Things don't tend to catch fire in the ocean, so I've only ever had to pay attention to fire when we did fires in natural disasters. And fire was only a major component of the natural disasters class in Kansas. So it's been like 7 years since I've had to talk about fire. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, people who work on land or live on land or know people who live on land. I failed you.
That's okay. We'll just move away from the fire.
There was there was an interesting talk before mine that I definitely wanted to see, and I did catch it, and it was about
Oh, I saw this.
courses. It was about coursework for students in Center College in Washington. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I knew it was a center type place, but it was in Washington, and it was about climate science.
It
but
says
it wasn't.
you've got Central Washington written here.
That's good.
Who is the person?
Ann Egger, and it was about transforming students into effective communicators. That was part of the title.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because this is very much how I would want to do a class on modern climate science, where a component of the class was about communication and about how people understand climate science and about motivated reasoning and about teaching people how to effectively communicate things. And the students found that part, they had to do 2 projects. One was like a sciencey project, and one was a grand unified project with everyone working together trying to do something that involves communication, and they found that much harder.
So this was the thing I thought was really funny, because it's a microcosm of what actually happens in academia. They all wanted to just be doing their own little research projects and didn't want to do the big outreach thing.
That's right, yeah. And, they were working with people who were in other departments and having social scientists be involved. And, even at the undergrad level, they were already starting to be like, I have to talk to other people, and other people don't all think like me.
Yeah.
And so that was really interesting. And each year, they did different projects that were their grand projects that the whole class worked on together that was outreach. And they all found that the outreach was the hard thing to do.
Were they all climate change related outreach projects?
They were all climate change related outreach projects. So one was communicating to people in the rural regions about risk perception for things related to climate change. The next year was an election year, and it was providing people voter information on various candidates at various local to state level candidacies, what their positions were on things related to climate.
They did the very smart thing as well, where they had separate sections for each of the major points, and then an explanation. But then there's just a letter grade at the bottom.
Yeah. B-.
And then the last one, which I thought was very interesting because this is a very active area of research in climate science communication, was how to visualize data for different audiences. So they had to tailor it to different audiences. And the speaker was saying that this was something they had a great deal of difficulty with. And that's definitely something that we all as instructors or people who do outreach with communities have difficulty with, altering the message to fit what's relevant to the audience.
This is when I get back. We're going to do earthquake outreach. That's going to be their class project for the next couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. Be prepared for them to say, this is hard.
I mean, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, it will be hard, but it's hard in real life, so it should be.
No, I'm excited. That's useful.
And then I gave a talk, and then after me, I talked about television. People like that. I had The Simpsons.
Yes, Simpsons Gentry Trauma.
Mm-hmm. I didn't have Disenchanted because I only watched it on the plane on the way here, so I don't have kids yet.
He put up it was real funny, he put up the big thing of Bill Nye Saves the World, and then that's the slide, literally just a screenshot from the splash screen on Netflix that people decided to photograph.
It's also what they used in all their promotional materials, so I thought it was the thing that was least likely to get me in trouble.
Yeah. Rowan Martindale, because I tweeted that you're doing this, replied with a GIF from him setting the world on fire with a blowtorch and asked if it was that one.
It wasn't that one, because that is a short clip. And that's actually an interesting thing, because it's very hard to get people to sit down for 25 minutes to watch a whole show.
Yeah.
There are, like, no studies of adults watching a complete program.
Yeah.
There are studies of children watching complete programs, and all the studies of adults watching a complete program are market research conducted by either the production company or the entity itself that made it.
Can I just point out, Aaron Stout just liked one of my tweets. It is 1 a.m. in England on a Thursday. Well, it's Friday now.
Okay. Wait, it's 1 a.m. in England?
No.
It's
No,
1 a.m. here.
No,
It's the morning there.
No, it's 1 a.m. in... Okay, no, I can't do time zones. I messed up. She just woke up.
Okay.
At the normal time. And the normal time is 7 a.m.
We're tired. It's normal there. Then there was a really great talk that I felt bad about not catching the speaker because I ran out after this to get into the talks in the other building that were about Palaeo. But there was a really great talk that I liked a lot about incorporating climate science into non-STEM disciplines in high school. And like things like providing resources for history teachers to talk about climate change and pressures and...
Do you want to hear about when all the food died for about 15 years and people couldn't live very well?
It was that same story, but over and over again in different parts of the world. Yeah, that's kind of...
Like, and then there was this famine, and then there was this other famine?
Yeah, so there was this famine in ancient Egypt, and there was this famine in Mesopotamia, and this famine in northeastern Europe that led to barbarians moving to the southwest and the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which is... I mean, it's a very popular story, and it's definitely true, but it's complicated. And then did you go to the talk at West Virginia where someone came and was talking about the Maya?
Was it a normal Clickroom talk, or is it... It
was in the library.
Oh, no.
That was an interesting thing, and it was somebody who's an anthropologist saying this is... Why are you giggling?
He comes into my office and says...
Because one day, Brendan, you'll have a job like ours, and then we'll give you this episode, and you'll go back and go,
He'll come into my office and say, have you read this paper? And I just look at him.
Yeah.
And the favourite thing is that there was one point where we'd been doing a bunch of stuff, and
it's like, that's why I have you to read them for me.
We're doing a bunch of stuff, and we're going to go and do lunch, and Brendan said, well, it's only 15 minutes, you don't have time to do anything, so I'll just stay and chat, and I'm dying inside. I'm like, these are the 15 minutes that I can do, like, one of the 30,000 things I have to do.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just only talk to you while you're eating a peach from now on.
It's fine.
I do start to feel guilty, so now I will go up when I think that he's eating, and then I'll talk to him while he's eating, because that way I have some human contact in the day.
You can come up and chat, but no, it's fine. It's fine. If it was a real problem, I'd be rude to you and just shut the door.
Kathy, don't tell him I'm here.
That's actually the nice thing. If I'm too quiet, you do just sidle across and start talking to Kathy.
Yep. Yes, that was good. It was making resources. It was interesting, and I wanted to talk to her, but I did not. And I really wanted to talk to her about the paper in Science about the size of Godzilla, because she talked about art and history, and she started talking about art and seemed really interested in it, and I was like, I wonder, like, film isn't a thing that comes up very much in high school, but, like, she's in Northampton. Northampton has Smith, and Northampton has artsy people as well.
My best friend from there.
one of my very good friends, his parents are professors there. Yeah. One of my medievalist friends. I have a disproportionate number of medievalist friends.
So, you learned many things.
About what? Oh yes,
see
then
what
I
goes
ran
on
across the building. I ran across to the other building to see the Panthalasson
You didn't
top.
finish the Maya thing. That's what happened. You were starting to tell us the Maya thing, and then you got distracted about James not having time to go to see the Maya thing.
Oh,
'Cause they're also a
so
climate
the
change
Maya
related
thing
thing.
is like a climate change related collapse of civilizations thing, but it's probably more complicated than the story than the geologists want to tell. Because it's not like it's not like everything collapsed. It was very much certain city centers collapsed in the culture and others did not, and you can watch the migration of people. So it wasn't like not as many people died as you would think from the way that some of the geologists tell the story. Gotcha. A lot of people moved, which is good, I guess, like if we're thinking about humans.
Except not, because, I guess it's better than dying. But if we don't allow for immigration in response to extreme climate, then it's bad.
It was an interesting discussion because it was tracking like how art and culture and pottery and stuff were changing because people were migrating out of certain regions into different major cities. So like some very major Mayan cities collapsed, but it doesn't seem like there was as much of a population decline as some geologists would tell the story because you can track how like cultural things migrated into new cities. Mm-hmm. So like people moved more than people disappeared.
Like the PETM. Yeah, and the plants.
Mm-hmm.
Talking of plants.
Talking of plants.
Oh, did you see a plant talk?
Did you go to plants?
I saw a plant talk about the decoding Devonian mass extinctions, linking land plant expansion to marine anoxia.
I wanted to see that. Tell us about
discussed a bit. Basically, it was looking at fluvial sections and looking at the basically saying that you get punctuated episodes of anoxia in the marine realm, often tied to major innovations in plants, like the origins of rootlets, which allow plants to then start breaking up the soil. And then other things. So basically, every time plants make some advancement that make them spread further, you get this pulse of anoxia. And so they were looking at the fluvial sections and looking at nutrient pulses.
So it's nutrients because they're weathering instead of sending nitrogen and phosphorus.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
So are we super plants?
Because
we serve the plants. We give the plants new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are we like new plant symbionts?
We cut the plants out entirely. We just put nitrates into the soil that just wash off at the first rainfall into the rivers.
In service of the plants. So, like...
So, where were these sections?
So these sections were in Scotland and...
I'm just wondering if it's regional or global.
This is the thing. These are noxic events. He kept saying that, and every time there's a noxic event, there's a mass extinction. But he wasn't using the term mass extinction in the way that you'd probably think it should be, because some of these mass extinctions are just in one basin, and like that's not
mass extinction. Yeah, that's just extinction.
Yes, exactly.
Dramatic extirpation. Just doesn't have the ring.
Yeah, and so there was a disconnect in
scale.
And so this was interesting, and it was showing that you got these nutrient influxes, and then you got anoxia. But it wasn't necessarily going to explain the global pattern. And there was the usual sort of non-discussion about the extinctions are like often erosive boundaries, and that can lead to biases in what we're seeing and that sort of thing. But it was very... But it was interesting to see this being looked at fluvial sections, which is something that I think has needed to have been done for a while. There was a wish list of places to go, like China and Argentina, to go and look at these. And get more of a sense of the global extent. So it was sort of a talk about, like, we start looking at the subfluvial sections and we are seeing this correlation and we need to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so my minor gripe was just the terminology of defining what is a mass extinction, which was the only minor gripe. But most of our record is basinal. And so if you're extirpating in your local basin, that is going to make our record look like we've lost everything, because that's what we're sampling. So, yeah. But no, it was interesting. And it was one of, I don't know, I can't remember what the session was called, but the session was basically things around mass extinctions and the way that they are bad before and after.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It was like a generic mass extinction.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I went to it later.
Because then the next one was the next talk I saw was the one that you also saw, and then apparently I stopped you from going to the next talk you wanted to go to. So.
No, you didn't. I ran back in time for it, but I had to get to the West Building because I wanted to see the New York panel on climate change and sea level rise person, and that was very interesting, and I appreciate it because all of the things that she was talking about, I also have through my dad. Most of the projects that he runs in construction management are part of this like sandy recovery and adaptation thing, and so it was interesting to see from that perspective, because it was like which regions were going to be buying out and which regions were going to be raising and which regions were going to be retrofitting in different ways, and she was talking about new worst case scenario modeling and whether people will buy into that or not. So it was like a bunch of things that were like, so this is where we think sea level will rise with like 90% confidence, but just in case like warm water gets under the ice and it starts melting backwards down slope, like what is the worst possible realistic-y case? And all of those cases will only happen by 2100 if we don't do anything.
Yeah, it's looking pretty likely.
Yeah, so
no, it's not.
Well, I mean, it was also
good.
it was a person who's thinking practically, so she's also saying like 2100 versus 2120. Like 2120, this New York City will probably still be there, so we might want to care what it would look like.
Isn't 21? I mean,
I think you might be.
That's the Rush album.
I just added 20 years to 2100.
So, like, we think it's going to be that different within 20 years? From 2100 to 2120?
Or
like, that the worst case scenario, 2100, isn't that different from a slightly less bad scenario by 2120.
Okay. Okay.
We're altering the trajectory,
we're altering the deadline that we have to raise the streets to.
By a couple decades, so it might as well be done now.
Yes.
Okay.
So, like, some of these horrible things that could happen, they're all unlikely, but they are all possible. Like, getting politicians to care about it is hard, but it's also harder because they got them all to sign off on, like, estimates in 2015 in the last New York City report. Like, this is what we think the 90% bad possibility is. And now there are some new, like, actually there's some studies about how warm water circulates under sea ice, and the fact that the land is sloped downward away towards the center of Antarctica means that there are some circulation models that are not very well constrained, and that not everybody is confident in physics-wise, but that under bad case emission scenarios plus like the bad end of those models could add another meter of sea level rise.
I mean, are there any models in which all of the ice melts and we go to like Cretaceous Permian world?
Not for a long time.
What is that long time?
Like several hundred years.
It's not very long.
I think it's like 400 years.
I mean,
like the Hansen estimate. So basically, there's a series of
we have
different
stuff around
stopping
now that
points.
We built 400 years ago. We'd probably keep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like,
just
hopefully we'll start
I'm planning on still being
some
around
point
then. So.
In 400 years. Oh, I'm leaving this planet. I'm done here. I've been here long enough. I put in my time.
Okay.
New planet.
That's your plan?
In 400 years?
Yeah.
I'll visit. I'll come back for GSA. But yes, getting people even in New York City to buy into like the
new plan.
Which is interesting because it's somebody who's coming at it from a planning perspective, who's very much in the like Hansen camp of like, this is what's probably going to happen, but you should know that these very bad things could happen, and like sea level is currently on the higher end of some estimates, so you should care.
New York City has specific problems associated with the first 20 streets are all reclaimed land, and
JFK is in the range of places that will be wet. Jamaica Bay is bad.
Yes,
JFK is bad as an airport, so if they would like to redo the whole thing, that's fine.
the majority of the usable transport routes are under the ground.
Yep.
That's fine, as long as the pumps stay on. I read that book. What's the name of the book? It was made into a History Channel series. It was very good. It was like, it was a book about what would happen if all humans just like instantaneously disappeared. Like, how long would our infrastructure run on its own?
They made that into a series, and it was just plants growing up from concrete.
Yeah, but like it was a really
Life After Man.
No.
Something suitably.
It was very
garbage.
similar to that.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was very interesting because as a New Yorker, it was fun to see, like, this is the time that, like, the Lincoln Tunnel would be unflooded.
Wasn't it
like
also
that.
like, and at this point, the lions that escaped from Central Park Zoo will have killed the last of the zebra, and now they are dead.
Yes, and the Statue of Liberty will last forever because bronze is our most enduring thing.
Just like the Colossus.
And, well, the Colossus, we melted it. Otherwise, it would still be there. And it is a bit suspicious that bronze was praised consistently, and I'm pretty sure that the author's wife is a sculptor.
Oh, interesting. That's funny.
Yeah, so Jamaica Bay, not pleasant. Then I went back to the non-education talks and saw Doug Irwin. And I got to the talk before Doug Irwin, and I didn't see who it was giving it. But
What session was he in?
Doug Irwin was in the party session, and it was
That's why. I've failed to use
it was like,
back.
I was very surprised just to see Brendan turn over that page and see Doug Irwin's name, and I was like, I don't remember deliberately deciding.
Yeah,
not to
exactly.
Go.
I'm like, I don't think I would have gone.
So the
to
talk
that.
before
Or if I
his-
decided not to go, which would have been a possibility, I'd have deliberately
Remembered. Yeah,
deciding
yeah,
to
no.
yeah.
So the talk before his was on biomarkers, and it was about how biomarkers that are indicative of euxinic conditions, which is high sulfide conditions, low oxygen, don't necessarily mean persistent euxinic conditions, because every so often in West Africa there's like burps of sulfide and they cause blooms of purple sulfur bacteria, and they could see in the record cores, they could see biomarker precursor molecules associated with euxinia. So like papers talking about the N-Permian and stuff about euxinia may not mean widespread, long-lasting euxinia, because the biomarkers can enter the sedimentary record even after very ephemeral events. And it was really cool because there were satellite pictures and you could see the blooms of things. And then Doug Irwin's talk, which is why I went into that room.
Mm-hmm.
So it was in a different room than...
How upset and distraught would it have made me? How much more complicated does it make my life?
Not at all.
Okay.
It doesn't. It was all about gene regulatory networks.
That's even worse.
So it's about gene regulatory networks, and it was saying that his 2013 talk was not right anymore. That was like what he opened with. It's like, and this is what I presented in 2013, and I don't think that anymore.
I flipped back to my notes and I was like, wait a second.
No, I know. I think that I saw that talk because I think that I met him in 2013 because I think it was the last time that my undergraduate advisor was at GSA. Yes, so it was about gene regulatory networks and the changes that happened on the way towards various things, and how all the things that he thought were unique to metazoans are also found in other holozoans, which are choanoflagellates, ichthyosporans, philodendrons, and I'm deliberately slurring that because that's the one that I never see in trees, so I don't actually know what it was, and I sat too far back to read it on the tree.
Philodendrons.
That's what I wrote. That's me slurring what I saw on the slide for the purposes of the podcast.
Okay.
But they all have some aspects of their lifespan that are multicellular, so it's not just choanos, and it's not just choanos plus ichthyosporans, it's also these other things. So all holozoans might sometimes decide to be really clingy with their friends and have specialized cells. So then he talked about which things do make metazoans special, and talked about different things and how the trans regulators and things like that, the things that are downstream in the sequence that are recruiters and promoters, are much more involved in the bilaterians than not bilaterian things. So distal enhancers and chromatin is new, and those things might be important. But then I couldn't read the things that were on the slide because it was a very big room and I was too far back. So I kind of wish I was outside where the slides were displayed.
Was the stenographer not helping?
No, because it was the slide, and I kind of wish I was outside and I could just stare at the screen.
Oh.
But there was something about how the timing of how these different promoters and enhancers that are not the cis regulatory network, like these other promoters and enhancers in lophotrochozoans and ecdysozoans, look like they were evolved independently for some reason that I literally just could not read on the slide, but that seemed to be the point that was being made.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in the abstract?
Oh, I didn't even bother to look. I'm a bad scientist. It could be the abstract.
He has a unique enough name. We could probably.
It was interesting. That was the end. It was interesting, and it's more gene regulation and promoters and stuff.
Cool.
And then I went to the
More
zombie stuff.
things to freak out my students in paleontology.
Why are they freaked out? Don't freak out.
No, just too many
GRMs.
names.
Did everybody here see zombies? Is that what?
Yes, we sat next to each other and saw zombies.
Would you like to talk about zombies?
Yeah, that's a good one. That was the last talk I saw that I intended to see and remember seeing, even though I saw other talks. So,
This was your last talk you intended to see.
yes.
And then, like a zombie, you just persisted and
Yes.
encountered objects.
Yes. No, it was a cool talk. It was basically saying, okay, Jablonski invented dead-plate walking. The idea that sometimes you can persist without recovery after a big extinction event whereby you remain low diversity, and as Jablonski originally had it, go extinct within the next sort of stage after.
Yeah.
But we've begun to notice that maybe some of the things that we think of as like living fossils are just dead walking that never died. And so this was...
But he's dead. They never died, James.
But someone
the
asked him.
ironclades.
Someone asked him at the end, and he sort of made a comment about we don't see a lot of things that rebound and then go extinct again. Like it seemed like you either go extinct and then either you drop in diversity and persist as extended dead clade, or you recover and then
You're fine.
you're fine, or like I don't know.
Clam, not clam.
I would have liked to have seen all the other trends.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
or a proportion. I don't know.
Yeah. There was, but they introduced the death sentence and the death knell. And so
Which was an unnecessary term. The death sentence was a useful term. The death knell
when
was
you go
a
extinct.
synonym for extinction.
Yes.
So
Final extinction.
I can see
Yes.
why they wanted to do death, lunch, but
Well,
the death sentence was a useful term.
I have been taught you have to name something, so
That is Warren's policy.
yeah,
Mhm.
and also Dave's.
Mm. We should name something.
I have named something. I did not name it after myself. We'll see if it gets past peer review. I went with heterochronic weighting, but for a long time I was trying to call it like the
The Lemsdale metric.
the justified clade level, or the JCL.
We'll find something to call that.
But yeah, and they're just, I guess at this point they're just identifying when it occurs. And they're using PBDB data.
Yeah.
Then they grouped things by what happened and what did not, and that felt very tautological to me. Categorizing things as groups that became dead clades walking and groups that did not, and then comparing the two felt somewhat inappropriate. Because
when they were comparing the two curves.
Yes.
And the curve is...
The curve is part... One of the groups
orbits.
is defined by the shape of the curve, and then you're comparing the shape of the two curves.
Yes, but those curves are also synonyms for the Paleozoic fauna.
Which was interesting. But that was...
I mean,
it wasn't a synonym, it was that the shapes were similar.
Yeah, but that's because you're looking at a changeover.
Yeah.
And that's all you're doing with that curve.
Uh-huh.
Like, the fact that the Paleozoic fauna lingers into the Mesozoic
Right.
is known.
And the reason why a lot of these dead clade walkings go extinct is because they're hammered in the Ordovician or the Devonian, and then the Permian's big
Cleans
and
them.
killed. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's why you've got that truncation. There's a lot of it's largely historical in signal.
Yeah.
With-
Though I would say there's a decent amount of Permian dead clade walking also. Like, people, like, Bellerophontic gastropods is, like, the one that comes to mind. Like, make it to the Permian and go extinct.
Yes.
Mm.
I can't think of others, but...
This is
Anyway.
this is why I think it would be.
But I don't think they get killed off the TJ. I think they go extinct someplace else in there.
But like
Yeah.
ammonites make it through the KPG for a week.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's... Yeah.
But that's why I think it'd be very interesting to see. I'd be interested to see if there is a common signal amongst things that undergo dead clade walking beyond just the taxonomic diversity.
I wrote down a thing that is related to that we can talk about later.
Okay.
That might be related to things that we've talked about previously.
Okay.
And then it ended with thanks to James and Curtis for future discussions in advance. And the first question was from James, and my side of the room burst into laughter, but James didn't notice.
I couldn't hear
You
that.
should have let me ask the question. When I said to him, I was like, what is it? I'm going to ask this
So
question.
he thanks James and Curtis for what he was sure would be useful discussions in the future.
Or I could have said, James has a question, but now he doesn't want to ask it. But I have it too, so... But
I don't want to talk about that talk.
The question was ecology. So, just so everyone's clear. You don't want to talk about that talk?
I don't want to talk
I
about
didn't see
this
what
talk.
that was. Okay.
Karen's talk.
Okay, then don't talk about it.
Because it's
Yep, I get you.
not ready yet. All of the problems I had with it have been solved, but it's not ready yet. And then I guess the next thing I went to was Don's talk, which had a wonderful sentence where he was about virtual field experiences. It was about helping facilitate learning and all that. And he had this sentence that I thought was beautifully ironic, that we need to reduce novelty space and cognitive load, which is the most ironic sentence on pedagogy that you can possibly have, because novelty space and cognitive load are definitely novel terms with complex cognitive interactions. And it was that time at the
that's a heavy
conference
cognitive load
where
for
I
whatever
found
time it is
I
right
found
now.
that hilarious
10:30.
at,
That was
5 o'clock
o'clock.
as the last talk of the conference. We need to reduce novelty space and cognitive load. And that made sense to all the people in the room. But so what that means, in case you're wondering, so that I can reduce novelty space, is that in introductory coursework, you want to have as high a percentage as possible of what students are working with initially being things that they're familiar with.
Mm.
So you could, say, introduce cladistics without talking about any of the terminology and just use, animals people are familiar with.
Did you see We talked about Kathleen's
We talked about
talk.
Kathleen's
That's
talk.
exactly what she wanted to
So
do.
that's
terms.
That's the idea
play.
that I'm using. You don't go into, a bunch of geologists and use complex associated cognitive terms.
Is this a convergence, a parallelism, homoplazy?
See, those are homoplazy is probably stretching it. That's that kind of thing. And then lots of stuff was good, except Don also did Prezi. He did the only Prezi talk that was at GSA, and it did take quite some time to make it function, because he also wanted to make a point about inertia in systems, and so it was semi-intentional, although he did say that he tried it earlier and it didn't cause as much problems. Switching to his personal computer and running it at GSA caused a slight delay.
There's no better way to make a point than to deliberately make everybody watching angry.
So his point was that, like, we need to be able to transition to newer and better systems of learning and not force everyone into PowerPoint. And
Right,
how we can be.
But the idea of Prezi being better is subjective, like hard subjective.
Yeah.
It is hard subjective. There is
Lecturing isn't better.
All right, so there's this one study that has to do with, like, depicting visual motion, which is like the thing that Prezi will cite when they try to sell you Prezi.
I want to do a Prezi, but everything is moving
Makes me
left,
anxious.
which is the opposite of progression.
Oh. Sorry, we killed your train.
That's okay.
You have a lot of things written there.
I do.
A lot of them are buzzwords.
That's true, but, like, some of them were things to ask in the, like, discussion after the
Is that
talk
literal
ended.
or lateral?
Where?
It looks like literal learning.
Okay.
Literal. So,
Because I liked the idea of the sentence parallel to lateral learning, but
No, it's so Don was trying to make a point about how when you're teaching people to read rocks, there is a parallel to how you teach people to read words and read stories, that you initially have to start with teaching that's structured so that people are learning how to read the rocks, and then from there you can move to, now we're going to show you some rocks and we're going to do interpretation. And so that virtual field experiences should be structured either so that you can opt into one or the other, or so that there's a very clear, like, division of here's our one that will walk you through what you're doing, and then here's another virtual field experience where you have more interpretive freedom. So, like, you need that there's a parallel to how you learn to actually read words, that you start practicing reading to learn how to read, and then afterwards you learn from reading all these scientific papers and stuff. And so that similarly virtual field experiences should be cognizant of the fact that how you structure it should be different if you're teaching people, here's how you read a section, versus, like, let's practice
what we
interpreting.
know.
Yes.
Oh, but you've given me a great idea for my next lab that I have to.
Yeah, see, that's it. The parallel to literal learning to read. Learning to read, and there's a parallel to literally learning to read, which is also punny because it's literal. And it could be littoral. This could be super
it could be a
punny.
littoral section
There's a parallel to literally learning letters, to literally learning literature, and literally learning littoral rocks. The end.
I'm glad you enjoyed the talk.
Yes, and I swear I was at GSA for all these other hours, but
I counted all the pages for NAPC because I only had 12 pages left, and I took 12 pages of notes at NAPC, and
there were several talks I saw that I didn't write anything down because I was running.
Yeah. I think also because I saw them at NAPC already.
There was a lot of talks that were already at NAPC. There were... I didn't write many notes for those talks. I just didn't.
Yeah.
Mainly because I've come to realise that I'll find it when it becomes a paper, and if it doesn't become a paper, I'm not going to cite it. And as much as I always con myself into thinking I will, I have never seen a method at GSA and gone, I'll use that, and then ever actually used it. So I've just stopped taking notes about it, unless it becomes a paper, in which case I'll get very frustrated trying to figure out how to use the method.
I have this opinion towards biogeobears, and I'll learn how to use it at some point.
It's okay, I didn't. I just had Curtis do it. So.
I'll stay friends with Curtis then. And Dana would like to advertise her Bitly. So if you didn't do that yesterday.
No, we didn't.
What is it of?
This is her survey that she wants everyone ever to take of what their background and their family background and their personal feelings towards evolution, creationism, use of intelligent design in schools and stuff like that.
She's trying to get us to give it to other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she would like
Okay.
to go home at Christmas and give this survey to everyone.
I fear that if I was to take it, I would just appear heavily canalized.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure that I only appear in it once. Dana's given it out in rooms that I've been in several times.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you want to add this to the bottom of the podcast, I can
Okay.
give you the bit.ly, and Dana would like you to share it with your students.
Cool.
Sure.
And
Or
I
my
saw
family at Christmas.
2 out of Kathryn Hayo's 4 talks
Those weren't today. Oh,
yesterday.
they were, okay. Yeah.
Did you see or discuss any of her talks?
I don't know.
So Kathryn Hay, who is a wonderful climate science communicator, and she started in astronomy and then took a climate science course the senior year that she was in undergrad, and was like, oh, I'll do this. And she writes papers in everything, and she is, and I'm gonna get the title wrong, but basically the UN just named her the hero of the planet or something that.
You said she was going
They have
to
a
get
title
an
that's
award.
very similar to that. That's their highest environmental honor, and I think that she went to New York today to get it. But she gave 4 talks yesterday because she gave an invited talk, the talk that she meant to give. She was given an award by Geology and Society, which was an hour-long talk at lunchtime, and then she gave a talk at a Baptist church in the evening. So she gave 4 different talks in the same day, and we can all feel exhausted just thinking about her.
And what did she impart you with?
Well, for one thing, I was very impressed with her use of active learning techniques, because she had set up a poll everywhere survey and invited everyone to participate. It did live polling during her talk.
Cool.
So during her award talk, she was engaged with her audience of everybody, and that was awesome, and it was broadcast and it was open to the internet as well. So she's we should all feel bad on every level, because not only was she
feel
doing awesome
inspired.
things, we should feel inspired. Yes, that's right.
And take these things forward into our own classrooms and
Yes.
opportunities.
So she was doing everything awesome, and she was talking about making climate science relevant to everybody, because it is relevant to everybody, because it is impacting humans, and most people care at least about 1 or 2 humans on the planet. And so the takeaway at the end was things like, here are the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. One of them is about climate, but climate is impacting all of them. So you can care about climate change if you care about access to clean water. You care about climate change if you care about access to disease. You can care about climate change because it is wiping out all of the differential in bringing people out of poverty, all the progress that we've made in the past 50 years, where we've moved a large portion of the world out of living on less than $1 a day. Climate change is disproportionately impacting poorer countries and communities, and they just don't have the resiliency to deal with it. So we are in danger of, in the next 20 or 30 years, wiping out all of the progress because of disproportionate impact. And so if you care about people or anything, or even yourself, you should care about climate change, so you don't need to make climate change a separate thing. You should always be trying to find the thing that you have in common with whoever you're trying to communicate with, whatever your shared value is. I really like her. She's a good person and deserves all of these awards and accolades. And if you've never read a paper by her, you should find one now. And I don't even care which one. You should just read it. It can be her charge coupled device. I think that's a thing. I think that's what CCD stands for on astronomy detectors, right? Her first paper is an astronomy paper, and it's cool, and it's about quasars. And you should read that. I don't even care what you read. You should read something by her, preferably about climate science communication. But the idea being that you should find shared values with people and not just attack people with sciencey stuff. You should go from a point of agreement and a point of shared value. And if you really can't find something in common with someone, then you're probably not the person who should be making that communication effort.
I've also learned a strategy for talking about racism.
Mm.
That you have to find a shared value with this person who is expressing prejudiced beliefs, and
Honestly, that's
So you need to
harder
find-
to me.
anyhow.
You need to find some prejudice that you share so that you can work on the ones that are bad.
Well,
We both hate Tortella,
it's
right?
more like life stories that you've shared
Yes.
and life experiences,
Yeah.
and then to be like, and do you really feel that these other types of people like really did wrong you in some way? Like, do you really feel that climate change?
Do you
is
think it was
real?
all of them or just one person that
Yeah,
happened to be
happened
that?
to be that way.
Yeah.
We've lost James.
Sorry,
He's
I
been
just
done.
realised that
We
I
had
really...
some sort of panic.
I just realised that I really should check the time of our flight, which is 10:50. So we probably want to leave here around 8:30 to get to the airport for around 9.
Did anybody yesterday talk about Neil Landman's talk?
I didn't go to it.
Okay. Well, I went to it, and I just want to say the words 400 external shell ornament characters. That was a
Oh, the
subset of the
phylogeny.
kinds of characters that he used in his tip-dating phylogeny. One category of characters, there were 400 characters in just the external ornament. Not the septa, not inside stuff, not macromorphology. 400. I had like 35 that I figured out in my snails, and some of them were repeating the same characters at different points in ontogeny, and I'm jealous. And I'm also astounded, and I'm even astounded because he did it in Excel based on what he showed, that Excel opened that many things. That's all I want to say. You can talk, I'm sure that you talked about lots of important talks yesterday, but if you didn't mention that, just
No, I didn't
400
see it.
of one class of character.
That's very good. It's about time that we figured out amyloids.
And Brendan's.
We closed the book on it.
Amyloid
I didn't mean
research
to
is
be that
now
loud.
finished. We've done it. We can stop.
We can stop.
Anything else that you saw, Carlie? You look like you were still writing.
I did have a whole. No, yeah, I wasn't writing now. No, I have a whole page of notes. I saw Jansen's talk about whether or not when you are looking at data and you have a lot of zeros in your data, whether or not those zeros are real zeros.
Mm-hmm.
So Jansen is a drilling predation person or a crab predation person, and so you might have no drilling predation on a specimen and call it a zero, but he was giving examples of a variety of types of studies where you might have a bunch of zero data points and trying to determine using Bayesian techniques where your zeros, what they might really represent, if it's like a sampling error or a taphonomy problem,
or true
or
absence.
actual zero.
Yeah.
Nothing, like you might have a particular species of clam that is never drilled because nothing wants to eat it.
Yeah.
Or it could be never drilled because 1 out of 5 of them were drilled and you only picked up 5 of them, and so there was a chance that you just picked up 5 that were never drilled.
But then he also said at the very end that there's no magic number.
There's no magic sampling number.
Yeah.
But the Bayesian inference on the things where they had very large samples did have much tighter error bars, whereas the things that were very few samples of the species
very large
had error bars
bars
ranging from nigh 100% to nigh 0.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
And he did not have any Hercules gifts, even though we talked about it.
This was the talk that was this the talk that ended when them saying, and if one of the previous speakers has the green laser pointer, please return.
Yes.
Because Jensen kept shutting off the PowerPoint when he meant to advance the slides.
Yes.
He only
But he recovered well. He did not freak out. It was as smooth as it could be when your entire screen goes black as you're talking.
Yeah. But he also was very clear in saying that this applies to any presence absence data.
Yes, that's what So he had gone through some other examples of other people's data. It was like predation on plants and whether or not these plants
caterpillars.
were eaten. Yes.
Caterpillars and flowers.
Yes. Herbivorous plants, I guess. Not predation.
Predation. Well,
I guess as
it's
a plant,
form
you
of
feel like
predation.
being predated. I also saw a talk. I'm actually not sure who the person was because they were speaking between 2 other talks that I had meant to see, so I just sat through it. But it was very cool. It was about thinking about the evolution of photosynthesis and how there are two. It's too late and I can't remember. Like when you do photosynthesis, there are two places that photosynthesis happens. There are two.
At the cellular
Pathways?
level?
What do you mean?
There's like two. It's like having two mitochondria. Like you have two zones of photosynthesis. It's not the right word. It's like two organelles, but it's not organelles either. Anyhow, there are some photosynthesizing organisms that have one type and some that have the other type, and then some more advanced, maybe you might call them photosynthesizers, that have both. And so it's sort of like multiple. It's evidence for multiple origins of photosynthesis, and then also lateral gene transfer, right? So that's already kind of the agreed upon thing. But what he was trying to say is you could make this tree of all the photosynthesizing organisms, both oxygenic and anoxygenic photosynthesizers, and then look at the fossil record, look at those of them that have symbiotic relationships with organisms we have a better fossil record of than things that are single-cell photosynthesizers. And their molecular trees that they create from this don't go back to the Archean when we also have cellular evidence of photosynthesizers. And so it seems like these origins of the current photosynthetic mechanisms and pathways that we have aren't necessarily the ancestral forms. Whereas maybe everyone would think of, and microbiologists, this person said, also would think of anything that's around today has been around forever, and that the microbial tree is just growing and growing and growing, and that it hasn't experienced extinctions. But he would suggest that it has experienced extinctions and that photosynthesis has maybe totally re-evolved, or like there have been like stem groups that have had totally different pathways we know nothing about that have totally gone extinct, and that we need to think of the evolution of photosynthesis and photosynthesis mechanisms and pathways the way we think about metazoans and stem and crown clades.
And did they drive him away with pitchforks?
No! Kathleen and I were like, oh, this is very cool. Kathleen asked a question. So he said that, there are considerations like maybe they were replaced, like, people, like the same hypothesis you would have for like Ediacaran and Burgess shell type fauna, like were they replaced by these other kinds of photosynthesis that we have today? Did the oxygen that photosynthesizers were making kill off other anoxygenic pathways, or did glaciation kind of play a role because there was some sort of, I think maybe where his origin point was also lined up with some glaciation events. Anyway, it was pretty cool, and I just taught all my students actually about the evolution of these pathways and lateral gene transfer in earth system science, and they're not biologists, and they were like, why is this biologist teaching us this class? What is she doing here? Anyway.
Damn dirty diatoms.
Could be much. I mean, the phylogenetics class in biology at WVU is taught by a plant person, so I send my students there, and every year they come back, and all they'll talk about is fucking polyploidy. And I'm like, okay, I know this is interesting, you are never to mention it again.
You work on arthropods.
I have asked plant workers every time I have the opportunity, how come plants are okay with polyploidy, and like most animals, no. Like, how do plants deal with dosage? And I've never gotten an answer. I've never gotten an answer from faculty, I've never gotten an answer from postdocs, I've never gotten an answer from anyone. I mostly get the response, I never really thought about it.
Dosage?
Like,
Dosage,
like one X chromosome suppresses the other in different regions so that like you don't have a completely different gene expression than I. Plants can just be like, you know what, let's all get together and we'll just cross like a fig and a sunflower, and they might make a new plant with twice as many of all chromosomes, and they're just like fine with it.
It's it's got to be tied to, well, okay, probably not, but the thing that's very different, which is also horrible and confusing, is the fact that they do both sporophyte and gametophyte, and that's just awful.
That shouldn't matter, because like during each stage you should, like, it can self, like a plant that selfs could have a legitimate single generation genome duplication event, And plants seem to be more tolerant of that happening. It's not as common in animals for that to happen. In plants, it can happen, and then you just, like, have a new species. And they don't die. Like, why doesn't it die? And the response I usually get from plant workers, even plant geneticists, is, like, I've honestly never thought about plants being different. Whereas, as an animal worker, like, we talk about the, like, 4 cases where this happens as being really interesting, and in plants it happens every other week, and they're like, oh, it's just fine. I ask people all the time, and whenever I meet a new plant person, I ask them that. And
when you said dosage, I thought about, like, nuclear reactor dosage.
Same, nucleus of the cell reactor dosage.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Is that not a term that people use? That was the term that Kevin used in our evolutionary developmental bio in undergrad, was dosage. And if that's not a term that's used in biology, I blame my undergraduate biology program, because that's the term I heard.
I also haven't thought about that in a while.
Because animals just die.
Yeah, it doesn't really work out often.
Our developmental biology lecturer was Latin American, and so he taught us about the formation of the mouth and the anus. So I can see how you could get a terminology that you've never encountered it before.
Oh, now here I am on the actual writing. There's 150 species, and there were 433 characters that were just ornamentation.
There you go.
That would crash Excel on my computer so fast.
He doesn't need that many characters. I have 150 species and 223 characters, and I get a result.
Yeah.
I'm sure you talked about that yesterday.
That's about all
I don't have
really
anything else.
did. I saw some student talks, but I think, again, they're kind of in a...
Yeah. Do you see any posters or anything?
I worked on my review. It has to be done.
Oh, I need to decline a review. Asked to review a paper. I know this isn't large for a large number of people, especially people that are well-known reviewers who are maybe considered diversity, who then get overburdened with far too many reviews. I reviewed 15 papers this summer, and I'm fucking done.
That's a lot.
I am done for this year.
Crazy.
I saw a poster yesterday, not today, that was interesting. It was about museums, and it was about practices in museums that could be beneficial to people who are on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
I thought that was very interesting.
Uh-huh.
And it was things like museums can set aside spaces that are like sensory areas, which you can think about, but also as a higher tier. There's more built into having to create space. But like simple things like just providing on your website what kinds of sensory information, people, like whether you're going to have things falling over, making metallic sounds. But like some museums have like roars and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Like saying on the website what would be expected in different regions in the museums as far as like flashing lights or loud sounds or things like that.
Some museums have holograms of people randomly appear, and I could see that being very distressing.
Where is that happening?
Which one was it? I want to say maybe it was the AMNH, but it doesn't look like it's a TV screen, and suddenly, like, Richard Forty appears and talks at you, or Neil Shubin will just show up and tell you about bloody fish.
It's not the field?
No, because I didn't get to see enough of the field. The most I saw of the field was where the coffee and the Thai coconut soup comes from. It was very good.
And Dana and I saw Kathy's first 5 o'clock talk together, and we both thought that was really cool because
That's really
it
good.
was lots of pseudomorphs of salt and stuff. But not just that. We really liked this one thing where it was a clump of mud with salt growing in it, and so there was syn depositional halite in the mud. And it was just a clump of mud, and we were like, both of us thought that we would like to have that image as a thing that we could use in teaching.
Uh-huh.
And that's it. That's all the things from yesterday that I felt like mentioning.
Cool. Let's see. I saw a couple of posters today. I saw Zhuhai Zhao's poster on this might be Precambrian algae and maybe there's a worm, but the worm doesn't have any organics on it. It looks kind of like an Atoya, but it also could be a trace fossil. And then the
Yes, we do.
Hi again, everyone.
Curtis is gonna love having to edit this. So,
Chris, we miss you!
so the worm might be a trace fossil. It does look a bit like a Toya. That was cool. But the real sort of buried lead was that these might be Precambrian alga, but the possible age ranges of the rock are Proterozoic to middle Paleozoic.
Wow. It's
We should have a time scale actually, like on the wall.
It's a very big.
It's too late at night. Like,
It's a real
real.
big error bar, including times where we know we have algae. So that was one poster.
This is either the first or the third to last algae.
Yeah. And then there was another poster by Britt Steinberg looking at horses in California, and that there was 2 species of horses placed into one genus, and now there's going to be 1 species of horses because they're just teeth. And turns out that when you wear down teeth, the wall pattern is different, and it's just the same horse named off 2 differently worn teeth, sets of teeth. So that was cool.
And whoever did the 3D printing for that, they painted them.
Yes.
And so that was nice, because they looked like fossils and not blue, like ours.
Yeah, well, you know.
Yeah. Cool.
I didn't see any posters. I have nothing to contribute, sadly.
And one of James' students had a poster that also had a fossil on it that was do you know what this is?
Yes.
Milk carton type fossil, and it followed the same pattern as the Tully monster, where everyone said, it is not my group, it's something else.
Yep. It was very good.
Are you my mother? No, I'm a dump truck.
So, yes, it's either a plant or an algae or a sponge or a very thin coral or a
With
bryozoan or a
Silurian.
silurian or
Cephalopod.
what were some other good ones? Cephalopod or that might be it, but I feel like there should be more. Very reasonably large conularid, that was one.
Yeah.
I told her she should start tallying them up on the poster.
Yeah.
And then just be like, that must be
She
it.
didn't
Yeah.
want to mark up her poster, which I guess is good because I think we're putting them all up in the hallway for department visitors soon.
Yeah. Cool.
I saw a poster 2 days ago about diverse voices in science. It wasn't geosciences only. And she had a space at the bottom for you to write suggestions in. But she confessed that was, we know this who this person is, I suppose, also. That it was because she just forgot to cut off that part and then just turned it into that. Which I was like, that's actually quite lovely.
That is clever.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
Oh, and the other thing that was plant-ish that animal workers found and weren't quite sure what it was Peggy Akabuchi found a thing, and she's been showing it to people on her phone, like all GSA, and it was on the poster today, and somebody did identify that, and apparently it's a lycopsid root, and so like the roots are a thing that people know and have described, but they're just like rarer to find.
That's cool.
And so she got her fossil solved,
That's
so
cool.
I'm a bit jealous for you.
That's beautiful. That's what GSA is about right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a good place to make a poster with a giant image of a photo of a thing that you don't know what it is and see what someone will.
This is like when people
Walk
from
by.
the public bring their concretions to us.
Yeah.
Except it only took 5 years for me to get someone to bring me something in Fossil ID Day that was a fossil.
Oh, really?
Yeah, everybody else who got fossils, I got only concretions, and once, and I probably have told this story on the podcast before, but I was once brought a plant that had been carved into like a piece of sandstone that was like the edifice of a building but had been dumped in the river behind somebody's house, and they're like, it's a plant, and it was just like an artist's loose rendition of a broadleaf angiosperm thing. It was like a magnolia carved on a piece of sandstone, and that was somebody who argued with me to try to like find out my credentials so that I could be like, why are you saying this isn't? And the person who was with him was dying because she was like, let's go home now. He wanted third opinion.
She was like, oh, I forgot that I put those rocks that I carved in the backyard.
Yeah.
It's fun when you get some good stuff.
No, but everybody else gets people to bring them fossils.
Yeah, so
I never got a fossil.
Just like random Devonian stuff I'm finding.
I get concretions.
Oh, yeah.
And things like that. My favourite one was, I think this is some sort of log, and he pulled it out. He was like, oh, okay. When I told him, he pulled it out, put it down. I didn't want to touch it because it was filthy. And I just looked at it and I said, so this is rebar with concrete around it.
Yeah.
And it was like...
Human trace fossil.
Yeah. Oh, this is why we need to teach geosciences.
No, but everybody else got to be brought fossils.
Yeah.
I just happened to never be brought an actual fossil. So all I did was bring sadness and disappointment to people for years.
But people get to still look through the shale drawer.
Yes,
take
they
home
could.
a fossil.
They could take home a fossil
So
from
that
the
you
shale drawer.
might leave them with bad news, but ultimately they did get a fossil out of their encounter with you. So you can.
It was like April of the 5th year of PhD. Like I had already like sent my dissertation to my committee the first time someone brought in something that was an actual fossil, and I was way too excited about it and probably put them off because I was like, "This is a real fossil. This is cool. This is what this." It was a cephalopod.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool.
So sometimes you do find a thing that is real and it is cool, and sometimes you find a thing that's real and is cool and you don't know what it is, and then you bring it to GSA.
Yep. So that was GSA.
And that is your crowdsourced.
Yep.
Yeah. Goodbye, guys.
Yeah.
We're sorry that we didn't replace Curtis with a beverage.
I tried. I had him there. I was trying to include him in the conversation.
It was when I dropped the bottle.
Yeah.
That was Curtis.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
That was Curtis running out of voice and needing to. Yeah.
Take a sip.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sound of the clatter.
Yes. Yeah. No. Okay. GSA's done.
Yeah.
Video YouTube.
And we won't go to another conference ever again.
Next year we flee the country, right?
Yeah. Everyone needs to remember their passports.
Yep. And get Canadian money.
Canada is indeed a different country.
I probably have enough to get by. Just socked away in some drawers.
Of Canadian money.
I mean, realistically, I'm going to buy most things on my credit card anyhow.
Yeah.
So I probably have a couple dollars worth of small bills and coins.
Yeah.
For snacks. Alright.
Okay.
Good? Is there an official sign off?
Yeah, that was
Officially,
it. Curtis,
the
edit this.
everybody.
Bye.